Hi and welcome back to WTIV. My name is Abisoye, and today we are going to be tackling a personal question. I'm all about the questions that we have about our worlds and about our experiences, and I wanted to start with a question about my own experience, and that has been with 16 plus education. It's been with my A levels, and it's a deep one for me. I failed my A levels multiple times, and I just really struggled over the years with why and how, mainly because I put so much effort into them. Well, or so I perceived, and then I didn't get the delivery on that. Like the delivery was failure. I really struggled with whether I would say the grades because my grades may be somebody's, oh, this is wonderful. But I will say that my failure started from getting even like U's and E's in exams. And then, those rose up a bit, but they were still in my ideas, not what was expected. And those feelings have really plagued me over the years. Now I am in my 30s. My A levels were so many years ago. I can even say a decade plus ago. And yet I still think about that Abisoye at 16 plus and the emotions and the feelings that she had. She was very, very sad, very, she secluded herself, didn't share. And yeah, she just felt very alone. And that no one would understand she was going through. And I wanted to kind of break that really and kind of not allow that those feelings to still be attached to me by understanding what could have happened and what could have been the reasons why I didn't achieve what I thought I should have achieved. So to help me figure this out, I'm joined by Kanayo Situ, who is a phenomenal educator. She's been on the front line of education for several years, done some incredible research on what students are going through during high-stake exams. You'll be hearing her insights throughout this episode, so stay tuned. So in total, I took exams for 7 A levels over 3 years. Even saying that out loud is very traumatic. Like, okay, yeah, that's the reason why you failed. But yeah, I took 7 A levels over 3 years. I started off with 5 and then I carried on with 3, but then the 3 changed over 2 years, which even resulted in me for 1 year taking AS and A2 of a new subject in just that 1 year. I put myself through a lot of pressure. When it came to past papers or the mock exams, I was getting really good grades. So I was like, okay, I can actually do this. But then when it actually came to the exam, flopped, failed. And so I was like, there's obviously something wrong with me, because why is it that I can do it before the exam, but when it gets to the exam, I can't do it anymore? So it must be around the stress of the exams, right? For me, I must have been freezing up when the actual exam was in front of me. And I know some of you may be able to relate with me, and I know some of you may not. Some of you may have experienced the pressure of exams and still pass with flying colors. Exam seasons are intense in general. When an exam is coming up, you're freaking out. Like there's an element of anxiety, which I think we all have. And I think in that time of our lives, there's so much riding on us, or we think there is, in terms of getting into university, even the topics or the subjects that we choose, everything we see as so vital to the next step happening. But we all have different responses to this period. I spoke to Kanayo and she gave me a bit more insight based on her studies of what could have been going through my head as I was entering every single exam hall.
I think one of the most significant things has been around test anxiety. So this idea that students, even before they enter the exam hall, they are so fearful about the outcome. And for many students, they're able to push through and, we do the exam as a rite of passage, but there's a select few students who they simply can't cope with exams. And for me, being a Nigerian teacher, There's one part of me that is like, "Ah, come on, like what are you scared of? The exam paper is not going to fight you." And then there's the psychologist in me that's thinking, do you know what? There's a mental block here. There's a real barrier for them, and it's almost questioning like, how did they get to this point where they are so scared about exams? How have exams been presented to them to the point of, oh, I can't do it? I'm reminded of there's this U-shaped kind of, I might even get my sticky note. Teacher. There's this U-shaped curved graph. I'll draw it. So this is a proper mock-up. But I've got performance here and I've got stress here. It might be flipped the other way around. But it's this idea that we all need an optimal amount of stress in order to perform really well. However, if you're too stressed, your performance is going to be low. And if you're too relaxed, your performance is going to be low. So for a lot of students who suffer from test anxiety, it's because they are too stressed. They know the stuff. If you ask them in a classroom setting, they know it. They can tell you, they can write the exam paper, but the moment you put them in the exam hall and you tell them this outcome is going to determine the rest of your life, for many students, they can't cope with that. And I hear it. The moment you make something so high stakes and you don't leave any room for error, and we're talking about fallible human beings full of error, but you tell them this is the be all and end all of your life, oh, me too, I'll be stressed.
I think at this stage, we know that perfectionism isn't the best thing. It's good to want things done correctly, but it can make you procrastinate. It can make you overcomplicate things. But what I've really learned from my conversation with Kanayo is that it can make you feel like failure just cannot be a possibility, that failure is the end of the world. And I definitely have felt that way about exams and just in general in life. And I know that I've been told, and I know to myself, that I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I think we all do to some extent. And so when it came to exams, every single failure, it was like it was the end of the world. And it took me further and further away from people, from joy. Like it was a really painful time. This is a very, very vulnerable episode. I knew it was going to be vulnerable, but okay. But yeah, for me, it meant I couldn't accept the grades. I couldn't accept the grades. I was like, okay, I have to do it again. I have to do it again. And try something else in it. Like, I couldn't accept it. And I think maybe even to this point, the reason why I'm doing this episode is because there's something in my heart that still can't accept the grades. Because it's like, how could you do it? How could you fail? For me, there was a lot of riding on it. So it's like, I do this thing, I've been told, that when I'm telling my story, that I should be comfortable with telling my story without having to say that I know other people have gone through something else as well, or I know other people go through things. I really struggle with that, so bear with me. But I struggle to share my failures with other people as well, because if I'm so hard on myself, it's like I can't even bear to tell somebody else. So it actually meant that period of my life, I was also quite distant from friends. There were some friends that were like, some friends stick closer than a brother, although I'm an only child. But yeah, there's some friends like that. But there were a lot of new friends that I met during that time that I just couldn't keep because I couldn't be my complete authentic self because of everything that was going on. And Kanayo's research is all around students sharing their exam anxiety and celebrations online, and she analysing the comments on Twitter over a period of time. And here's what she had to say about the beauty of sharing your failures as well as your success stories.
I think part of having grace for yourself in these students' eyes is perhaps sharing their experience, sharing their mistakes, sharing their successes so that others can see, do you know what, I'm not alone. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge that what they are feeling is very real, and it's okay, and it's normal. I think the issue that we've got in 2024 is that we've labeled anxiety as this thing that is outside of the norm. It's not. Everyone experiences fear, but then it's getting them to question, okay, why am I scared of this thing? Have I got any evidence that doing this exam is going to cause me any harm? And most times they can't evidence it. They can't tell you that the paper's going to jump out at them and attack them. So it's almost getting them to break down those irrational thoughts. And then also, like, I love the fact that you mentioned, doing practice papers. Practice papers is one thing, and it gets you into the right mindset of, okay, I'm ready for the exam. But then the mental side of things, what am I going to do if I fail this exam? And again, Nigerian Christian, failure is not an option. You cannot fail, blah, blah, blah. But truly, can we just consider, what will I do if it doesn't go well? Oh, well, you shouldn't have a plan B. Me, I support having many plans. I support. You have your main objective, absolutely. But should that objective not be met in the time that you want it to, what's your fallback option?
So for 3 years straight, all I really knew was failure. That's what I had in my head. Failure, failure, failure. And it resulted in me doing exams, like I've said, multiple times. Even I remembered that in the first year of university, I actually did some A-level exams in January. Like I just I couldn't let go. A-levels was the only option that I was presented. There was no other pathway that was presented to me. And I don't know if it's because of my background. So I schooled in private schools for my whole life since nursery. I've known private schools and grammar schools all my life. And at the time when I was doing my A-levels, there were BTEC options. So just to clarify, because I've been saying BTEC, 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 and I didn't even know what BTEC was. So BTEC stands for Business and Technology Educational Council Qualifications. They had different levels as well of BTEC. It was like a triple BTEC. So that would be like equivalent to 3 A-levels. And then they had one that's equivalent to 2. They had various options. But with the environment I was in, that was not an option. And in fact, it was unfortunately looked down on. It was like, oh, this is the easy way. The only opportunities that were presented to me were harder things than the norm. Harder qualifications to do like IGCSE or further maths or triple science, and then international baccalaureate, which is just like a harder A-levels. That's what they would offer, or they would present as that's what you should be aiming at. It wasn't to do things that they perceived to be easier. And I think also at the time for BTEC, they didn't have the subjects that I wanted to do. So I studied maths, philosophy, English language, history at one point, physics at one point. What else did I study? I think I said 7, so there's more. I think general studies was in there as well. Let me see. Maths, English, philosophy, English language, physics, history, that's the 6th, and general studies, that's 7th. There we go. Yeah. But anyway, I say this to say that it was not presented to me as an option. But from what Kanayo told me, the environment and what is available with BTEC right now is completely different.
I mean, I think students today are very blessed in that I think when we were both doing our A-levels, the only BTEC options were the BTEC triple awards. And that was, okay, you don't even have the option of doing 1 A-level or maybe 2 BTEC singles. Your life was either BTEC or A-level. Whereas now, students have the option of, oh, do you know what? I want to do an A-level in psychology, but I want to do a single award BTEC in media. And what that does for that student is, yes, A-levels are tagged as more academic, but the BTEC option is definitely academic. You've got exams and you've got coursework. And I think the coursework part is great in terms of preparing students for university. Those are the type of options that I think more of our students nowadays need. The 3 A-level pathway, 4 A-levels some students are doing, is great for those students who are academically inclined. But I think our education system is too narrow. It's pushing all students towards this narrow academic route when, let us be honest, not every single student is academic. Some are more practical, and we need people to fill practical roles in society.
Kanayo's right. Not every student is academically inclined. And with that, it's good to have options. It's good to have A levels, BTEC, and also T levels. T levels were introduced in 2020 as a new qualification heavily promoted by the government for students aged 16 to 19. They work similarly to BTEC, but about 80% of their course is mandatory industrial placements. So yeah, they're pretty career focused, and employers have been involved in the designing of T levels. They come with UCAS points. So yeah, there's still an entry into university with them. It's good to have options. I'm glad that there is more options today. I think it's just for all those options to make sense and those options to be of great value to the students that they are for. I understand with T levels, what a T level is equivalent to 3 A levels. So whereas with BTEC right now, you can mix BTEC and A level qualifications together, with T levels, it wouldn't be advised, because that means you have equivalent of 3 A levels in one qualification and they're doing something else, which means that you're requiring students to specialize, to know exactly what they want to do, which from my experience, I mean, some people knew when it's like medicine, law, etc., they were very inclined and knew exactly what they wanted to do. Having said that, a lot of those people that I know that did that are not in those fields. But the beauty of 16 plus qualifications is to feel out and to see what you actually want to pursue, what you really are engaged by and engaged with. So it does enhance that narrow path that we were talking about earlier on. Right now, the Labour Party are considering whether some BTEC qualifications will be replaced by those T levels. As I said, it's like overlapping. So if these T levels are not necessarily creating more opportunity for students and actually making them take a more narrower route, it does beg the question whether that's the best thing to do. To clarify, that conversation or that situation that Labour is in right now, where they're considering, is something they inherited from the Conservative Party. So they are considering whether they're going to go with what the Conservative Party was going to do and remove some BTEC qualifications and replace them with T levels, or keep them as is, or they may have another suggestion. And I guess with any new qualification, it takes time. Like I said, when I started my A levels, BTEC, there were only a few options, and now there's so many. And it was looked at a certain way, and now it's not. So these things do take time as well. I want to talk about examination boards, because my only interaction with examination boards during my A levels was to ask them to review my grades. You actually had to pay to get your exam reviewed again. And I'm trying to remember if any of those reviews actually came back with better grades, but probably not. But I am really interested in knowing how in tune they are with the students that are taking their exams. What exactly do they do with feedback that they receive about their exams?
So I've been an examiner for an exam board for, I want to say, since 2018, so quite a long time now. And one thing that my research speaks to is how sometimes exam boards and teachers and the government can view students who are complaining about their exam experiences as students who are disengaged with the whole education process. But actually, my research puts a spin on it that these students aren't disengaged, they're being very critical, and they're using social media as a way to voice their critical thoughts. So one example, and I had the opportunity to share my research with AQA, and they were bamboozled by it. And one example is there was an exam question in an AQA psychology paper, and the question was around minority influence, and I was asking students following a scenario whereby they said, oh, Jenny is a psychology teacher and she wants to influence her department to stop marking and blah, 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 explain how she could use minority influence. And students on Twitter are quite rightly said, if Jenny is a psychology teacher, then she should already know about minority influence. So that is them being very critical. And the exam board, all they needed to do with that paper that was actually sent out, I think it was in 2018, just change Jenny is a business studies teacher. Jenny's a physics teacher. And that way students can actually say, okay, yeah, fair enough. I can tell this teacher how they would apply minority influence. So I use that as an example that when students are sharing their exam experiences online, it's not always about, oh, their mental health. It's not always about, oh, their joys of the exam. Sometimes it is them being very critical and offering very good advice to exam boards who may listen. More recently, AQA have created a student advisory board, and they sent quite a few teachers emails, encourage students to be part of this advisory board, which I think is a good step. But I guess the issue with advisory boards is what type of students are going to volunteer for that.
Another point on examination boards is that in my experience, they differ so greatly, because I went to 3 different schools, and I think between those schools, I experienced different examination boards. That was what maths was a consistent subject I studied throughout the years. And so I experienced OCR maths, EdXL maths, AQA maths. Every single one of those was different. And I wanted to speak to Kanayo about it, because I was like, could the fact that I was going to so many different schools and experiencing different examination boards have actually also impacted the results I was getting?
Each examination board, they will have their specification for their subjects, but those specifications are regulated by Ofqual. And in essence, if we're going to talk about validity of exams, in essence, if I sat an AQA psychology A-level paper 1 and I got an A grade in that, I should, if OCR is measuring my aptitude for psychology A-level, I should, if I sit there paper 1, AQA's OCR psychology, I should also get an A. But we don't see that happening because schools select their exam boards. They will teach according to the exam board. There'll be certain resources that are available depending on the exam board that you're going to teach. So for me, I've always taught AQA. If I was to deviate to another exam board, I would be, scruffling and looking online, what resources are available on there, what teacher communities are available, what's the best way to teach when you're using this specification. So you will notice a difference, but in terms of validity and how exam boards are regulated, it should be like for like. If you get an A in AQA psychology, you should also get an A in OCR psychology for sitting the exact same papers. But it doesn't happen.
I was predicted AAB from the beginning, and let me tell you, I wore that AAB like a badge of honor. I said, yes, that's me. I've got conditional offers for X, Y, and Z. That's me. But I wore it as a badge of honor because my actual exam grades were not translating. It was like a hope, like, wait, but I've been predicted AAB. So if I've been predicted AAB, I should be getting that. So even though my exam results are saying crazy alphabet, there was still hope for me because of those predicted grades. And no matter what school I went to, they still predicted those same grades. And when I look back, I'm like, why did they do that? I know that I was doing really well with practice papers, but still, when I look back, it doesn't make that much sense because the proof was in the pudding. I wasn't getting the grades. Kanayo explained it really well to me that my A-level predicted grades started way before I even sat my first A-level paper.
One major issue with predictive validity is that schools, for some reason, will use what a student has got in their GCSEs to predict what they're going to get at A-levels. And let's face it, when that 16-year-old or 15-year-old sat their GCSEs, they were sitting it so that it will assess their knowledge of the content that they had learned at GCSE. That qualification in no way has the power to predict what you're going to get at A-levels. So I think there's like a misuse of GCSE grades, even primary school grades. I've got some students, they got, I don't know, a reading score of 105 in primary school. That means that they're very good at their reading. So, but then as a result, in my school, they're labeled as a high prior retainer. Okay, that's really wonderful. But that same student in their GCSEs, their average GCSE grade was maybe a grade 3. High prior retainer, grade 3, they're now doing A-level, and guess what? Their A-level predictions are based on what they got in primary school. So I'm expecting them to get an A. I'm sorry. So we can see there's a complete misuse of data, and I think schools need to get better at that. There's the sociology of education, which is that there are so many internal and external factors that can predict a student's success. And internal, we can say, yeah, absolutely schools and the type of school you go to. But some of these external factors, so outside of school, things like material deprivation. Do you have the right resources that you need in order to do well? Do you have a computer at home? Because now lots of schools will set homework on Microsoft Teams, all manner of software. Do you actually have it at home? Do you have a desk at home that you can work on? Do you have access to cultural capital? Are your parents taking you to museums? Are your parents actually talking to you about school? All these things are additional factors that can affect a student's outcome way outside of what the school is providing.
During the conversation with Kanayo, she brought my attention to the idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is when you do something that truly matters to you. And extrinsic motivation is when you're motivated by meeting an expectation or not wanting to disappoint. I really thought about this in terms of my education, because I think for the most part, my motivation to do well came from my desire to meet expectations and follow the status quo and be perfect, which is not possible. And I think people had an idea of me as well, like with my background, how I scored, how I spoke. People had an idea of me, and it felt like I had to keep it up, whatever the idea was. I think I just put a lot of pressure on myself based on external factors rather than internally, I just want to do well, so I'm going to do well. But I came across this study by Erik Erikson, and it's all about psychosocial development. And he stated that during the adolescent stages, so that's between 12 to 18, we begin to form our identity. And this is when we ask the big questions like, who am I? What do I want? What does success look like to me? And if there's too much noise from external pressures or expectations or comparisons, it becomes difficult for us to answer those questions. And if you don't have a clear understanding of your why, it's hard for you to stay motivated. And I just feel like, whew, okay, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense to me. And I can see how me allowing all those external pressures to define me meant that I never took time to define myself or to understand myself. I think it goes back to that curve as well. Like, I might not have been working efficiently, might not have been working the best I could have for myself because I wasn't truly in touch with myself. I was too busy thinking about how will my results impact how people see me rather than how I'm known to myself. Kanayo put it in a really perfect way when we spoke. She said that intrinsic motivation, the kind that comes from within, is so much more powerful than external pressure. Extrinsic motivation can feel overwhelming when the stakes are too high. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I told you before, the first year of uni, I was still trying to change my A-level results. But something shifted towards the end of that year. So I didn't do that well in my first year. I just passed. 40 is the pass mark. I think I got 43. But something still shifted at that time. And I put myself out there. First of all, I won ACS president for my university. And that was a big thing because it was voting. And it made me feel like I had succeeded in something outside of education. For the first time, I was no longer a failure. And it opened my eyes to the possibility that I can actually succeed. And that was enough opening for me to have a different mindset when it came to my education. And then in my second year, I got a first. In my third year, I got a 2-1. Like, things just shifted after that moment. So yeah, I had to let go of the failure to open up a new season, a new chapter of my life. Well, we've come to the end of the episode. As I said, this one was personal. It was a reflective one. I felt like I was in a therapy session with Kanayo, and I just want to say thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, for the research that you are doing. I didn't even know that this time would come that I would want to talk about something like this, but to know that we have academics, we have researchers at our fingertip that are in our community that we can reach out to for insight, I greatly appreciate. So if you have any questions for Kanayo, her details are in the description. Please reach out to her. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, I found peace. I found peace in this discovery. So I guess on to the next question about life, about this world. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, anything that you want me to cover, let me know. And yeah, remain curious and keep valuing the truth. Bye.